You climb the biggest mountain in the world.
I think big mountains are humbling.
Have you ever stumbled upon something that made your stomach drop? Not because it was dangerous in that moment, but because it whispered a terrifying story from the past? The world is full of places that look ordinary at first glance. Quiet mountains, silent forests, abandoned islands. But hidden within them are discoveries that leave even seasoned explorers shaken. Sometimes it's a frozen body that refuses to disappear. Other times it's an object that silently records the exact second someone died. These aren't just strange findings. They're chilling reminders of how fragile human life can be when faced with nature. Many of these discoveries were found by people who had absolutely no idea what they were about to encounter. In the next few moments, we're going to uncover some of the most unsettling discoveries ever found in the world's creepiest places. 10. Green boots, Mount Everest. Imagine pushing your body to the absolute limit, climbing through freezing winds thousands of meters above sea level, knowing every breath is harder than the last. Now imagine turning a corner on the mountain and realizing someone died right there, and has been there for years. High on Mount Everest, above 8,000 meters, climbers enter what's known as the death zone. At that altitude, oxygen is so scarce that the human body slowly begins shutting down. Even the strongest climbers are essentially racing against time just to survive. And rescue? Up there, rescue is almost impossible. For nearly 2 decades, climbers making their way along Everest's northeast ridge encountered something deeply unsettling. Tucked inside a small limestone cave was the frozen body of a climber known only as Green Boots. The name came from the bright neon green mountaineering boots he was wearing. His body lay partially inside the cave, his legs still visible to anyone climbing past. It became such a recognizable landmark that climbers would actually use it as a navigation marker while heading toward the summit. Most believe Green Boots was Tsewang Paljor, an Indian climber who died during the deadly 1996 Everest disaster after being caught in a brutal storm near the summit. At those extreme heights, the cold preserves bodies almost perfectly, and moving them is incredibly dangerous. So year after year, climbers passed by the cave, forced to confront a chilling reminder of what the mountain can do. It wasn't just a body, it was a warning. Because on Everest, when someone dies in the death zone, they often stay exactly where they fell. The mountain simply refuses to give them back. And for thousands of climbers chasing the dream of reaching the top of the world, Green Boots silently reminded them how thin the line between victory and tragedy really is. 9. Aokigahara Forest, Japan. At the base of Mount Fuji lies a forest so dense that sunlight struggles to reach the ground. The trees grow twisted and tightly packed. The air is eerily quiet, and compasses often behave strangely because of the volcanic rock beneath the soil. This place is called Aokigahara, but many people know it by another name, the Suicide Forest. From the outside, it looks like a peaceful natural escape. Tourists come to hike its trails, photographers capture its haunting beauty, and guides warn visitors to stay on marked paths. But step deeper into the forest, and the atmosphere begins to change. The silence becomes overwhelming. One of the most unsettling things hikers sometimes discover here isn't bodies. It's the things left behind. Scattered throughout the forest floor are abandoned tents, sleeping bags slowly rotting into the damp soil, empty water bottles, and personal belongings that clearly haven't been touched in years. Some of these campsites look like someone simply stood up and walked away, and never came back. Even more disturbing are the strips of plastic tape tied to tree branches, stretching deeper and deeper into the forest. These tapes act like breadcrumbs. People tie them along their path so they can find their way back out if they change their minds. But sometimes the trails of tape lead to nowhere, ending abruptly in the middle of the woods. And when that happens, hikers realize something chilling. Every year, authorities conduct searches to recover bodies within Aokigahara, but the forest is vast and incredibly dense, meaning many areas remain untouched for years. Which means when someone stumbles across an abandoned tent deep in the trees, there's always a disturbing possibility. Its owner might still be somewhere out there, hidden beneath the forest canopy, swallowed by one of the quietest and eeriest places on Earth. 8. The Frozen Sailors, Beechey Island. In the remote, frozen wilderness of the Canadian Arctic sits a small, desolate place called Beechey Island. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a quiet stretch of icy coastline. But buried beneath that frozen ground lies one of the eeriest discoveries in exploration history. The famous Franklin expedition set out from England to find the long-sought Northwest Passage, a sea route through the Arctic connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Two ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed into the Arctic with 129 crew members, and then they vanished. For decades, no one knew what happened to them. The ships disappeared into the ice, leaving behind one of the greatest mysteries in maritime history. But nearly 140 years later, investigators arrived at Beechey Island to examine 3 graves that had long been known to exist there. The graves belonged to crew members who died early in the expedition. Scientists hoped that studying the bodies might finally reveal clues about the expedition's tragic fate. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. Because when researchers opened the grave of John Torrington, a 20-year-old sailor, they expected to find a skeleton. Instead, they found a face. The Arctic permafrost had preserved his body almost perfectly. His skin was pale blue, his features still intact, and his milky white eyes were wide open. He looked less like ancient remains, and more like someone who had died only days before. The preservation was so remarkable that scientists could examine his tissues and hair. Their analysis revealed something shocking. The sailors had been suffering from severe lead poisoning, likely caused by poorly sealed food cans carried on the ships. Combined with freezing temperatures, starvation, and isolation, the expedition slowly descended into disaster. Today, the frozen faces of those sailors serve as haunting evidence of a doomed journey into one of the harshest environments on Earth. A chilling reminder that sometimes the Arctic doesn't just claim explorers, it preserves them. 7. The wreck of the Titanic. More than 12,000 feet beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, the remains of the Titanic sit in total darkness. Down there, sunlight never reaches. The water is near freezing, the pressure is crushing, and the silence is absolute. It's a place humans were never meant to see. Yet in 1985, a deep-sea expedition finally located the wreck of the legendary ship that sank in 1912 after striking an iceberg. For decades, the Titanic had been one of the greatest maritime mysteries in the world. But when cameras finally reached the ocean floor, what they found was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. The massive shipwreck rises out of the darkness like a ghostly monument. Rust slowly eats away at the once luxurious vessel, while twisted metal and collapsed decks show the immense violence of its final moments. But it's not just the ship itself that sends chills down people's spines. It's what's scattered around it. Lying across the ocean floor are hundreds of personal items, suitcases, dishes, and most haunting of all, pairs of shoes. Leather shoes rest silently in the sediment, often sitting side by side exactly where their owners once lay. Over time, the bodies themselves decomposed in the deep sea, but the leather remained. Those shoes now mark the places where passengers and crew lost their lives. Some appear as mother and child pairs, others belong to crew members still near their workstations. Each pair represents someone who never made it to a lifeboat. To deep-sea explorers who have visited the wreck, this is the moment that truly hits them, because suddenly the Titanic stops feeling like a famous shipwreck, a mass grave resting quietly at the bottom of the ocean. A silent reminder of the night over 1,500 lives disappeared into the freezing Atlantic, leaving behind nothing but rusting steel and the shoes that mark where they fell. 6. The Vampire of Venice. Venice is often called one of the most romantic cities in the world. Its canals, historic buildings, and centuries of culture make it feel almost magical. But hidden among the islands surrounding the city lies a place connected to one of the strangest and darkest discoveries in archaeological history. The island of Lazaretto Nuovo once served as a quarantine station during the Black Death, the devastating plague that swept across Europe in the 14th century. Ships arriving in Venice had to stop there, and anyone suspected of being infected was isolated from the rest of the city. Thousands of victims of the plague were buried in mass graves on the island. Centuries later, archaeologists began excavating those burial sites to study how the disease spread and how people were buried during the epidemic. They expected to find ordinary skeletons like those discovered in many historical plague pits. But one skeleton stood out in a disturbing way. The remains belonged to a woman whose skull had a brick jammed directly into her mouth. At first glance, it looked violent and strange, but historians soon realized it was actually connected to a terrifying belief that existed during the Middle Ages. At the time, many people believed in creatures known as shroud eaters. According to folklore, certain corpses could rise in their graves and feed on the burial shroud wrapped around their bodies. As the cloth disappeared, people believed the corpse was literally consuming the living, spreading disease and death among the population. They would place a stone or brick inside the corpse's mouth, preventing it from feeding and rising again. The skeleton discovered in Venice is one of the clearest physical examples of this superstition ever found. It's a haunting reminder of how fear and desperation during the plague led people to do unimaginable things, even desecrating the dead to stop monsters they believed were real. 5. The Crystal Maiden, Aktun Tunichil Muknal Cave. Deep inside the jungles of Belize lies a cave so sacred that the ancient Maya believed it was a gateway to the underworld, a dark realm they called Sibalba. The cave is known as Aktun Tunichil Muknal, often shortened to ATM Cave. Visitors must swim through underground rivers, squeeze through narrow rock passages, and navigate chambers that have remained untouched for centuries. But hidden deep within one chamber is a discovery that has left explorers stunned. There, lying on the cave floor, is the skeleton of a teenage girl known today as the Crystal Maiden. At first glance, the skeleton almost sparkles under the light of a flashlight. Over hundreds of years, minerals from the cave's humid environment have coated the bones with a thin crystalline layer, giving them a strange, glittering appearance. It's beautiful and deeply unsettling. Archaeologists studying the remains discovered that she was most likely a human sacrifice offered to the Maya rain god Chak during a time of extreme drought. Evidence from the skeleton suggests her vertebrae were crushed, indicating she may have been struck or killed during the ritual. Even more eerie is the fact that her skeleton remains exactly where it was left. Unlike many archaeological discoveries that are moved to museums, the Crystal Maiden still lies inside the cave, partially fused to the ground by mineral deposits that formed around her bones. Visitors who reach the chamber often describe a strange, heavy atmosphere. The silence is overwhelming, and the glittering skeleton reflects light like something frozen in time. It's both mesmerizing and haunting, a reminder of an ancient ritual where a young girl's final moments were offered to the gods, deep inside a cave that the Maya believed was the very entrance to the underworld. 4. The Nuclear Shadows, Hiroshima. On August 6, 1945, the city of Hiroshima experienced one of the most devastating moments in human history. When the atomic bomb detonated above the city, an intense flash of thermal radiation swept across everything below it in an instant. The heat was so powerful that it bleached stone, concrete, and building surfaces throughout the city. But something strange and deeply haunting was left behind. In certain places around Hiroshima, you can still see what are known as nuclear shadows. These aren't ordinary shadows. They are the outlines of people who were standing or sitting when the bomb exploded. In the split second before their bodies were vaporized, they blocked the intense heat and light, preventing the surface behind them from being bleached. The result was a permanent silhouette burned into the ground. One of the most famous examples shows the outline of a person sitting on the steps of a bank, but that shadow marks the exact spot where a human being was instantly killed. These imprints, sometimes called flash burns. They are not statues or memorials created later. They are the exact negative spaces where lives ended in a fraction of a second, silent, haunting reminders of the moment an entire city changed forever. 3. The Monster Claw, Mount Owen. In 1986, a group of explorers entered a cave system deep within Mount Owen in New Zealand. The cave environment was cold, dry, and incredibly well preserved. Perfect conditions for keeping organic material intact. But while exploring the cave floor, the team discovered something that immediately made them stop. Lying there was a large clawed foot, complete with scaly skin and darkened flesh still attached. It looked disturbingly fresh. The claw itself was massive, with long curved talons that looked more like something from a prehistoric monster than a modern animal. For a moment, the discovery sparked genuine fear. What kind of creature could have left something like that behind? Was there some unknown predator living in the cave? But after scientific analysis, researchers realized the truth. The foot belonged to an upland moa, a giant flightless bird that once lived in New Zealand but went extinct around 500 years ago. What made the discovery so shocking was how perfectly preserved it was. The cave's dry and stable environment had essentially mummified the limb, preventing it from decomposing. Even centuries after the species disappeared, the claw still looked like it could move at any second. It was like staring directly at a piece of prehistoric life, frozen in time. 2. Ignacia Aguilar, the Mummy Museum. The Museum of the Mummies in Guanajuato, Mexico, contains dozens of naturally preserved bodies that were accidentally mummified by the region's dry climate. But among them is one discovery that stands out as particularly disturbing. The mummy of Ignacia Aguilar tells a terrifying story. When workers originally opened her coffin during exhumation, they noticed something strange. Her body was facing downward, which was unusual compared to the other remains. Her forehead had deep scratches. Her arms showed bite marks. Her expression appeared frozen in what looked like a scream. The horrifying realization soon became clear. Ignacia had likely been suffering from catalepsy, a medical condition that can cause a person to appear completely lifeless. At the time, doctors mistakenly believed she had died and buried her, but sometime later, trapped inside a coffin beneath the ground, the scratches and injuries suggest she tried everything to claw her way out. Her mummified body remains one of the most chilling exhibits in the museum, a tragic reminder of how terrifying medical mistakes could be in the past. 1. The Elephant's Foot, Chernobyl. In the basement of Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, there is something so dangerous that simply standing near it once meant certain death. It's known as the Elephant's Foot. After the catastrophic nuclear explosion in 1986, molten nuclear fuel mixed with sand, concrete, and metal as it burned through the reactor. As this radioactive lava cooled, it hardened into a massive black formation, resembling the wrinkled skin of an elephant's foot. But what makes it truly terrifying is the radiation it emits. When scientists first discovered it, the radiation levels were so extreme that just a few minutes of exposure could deliver a lethal dose. Cameras and robots had to be used to approach it because humans simply couldn't survive long enough. Even today, decades later, it remains one of the most dangerous objects ever created by humans. A silent, steaming mass deep beneath the reactor, serving as a permanent reminder of the worst nuclear disaster in history. If these discoveries gave you chills, you're definitely not alone. The world is filled with places that hold dark secrets and unsettling reminders of the past. So which discovery disturbed you the most? Let us know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed exploring these eerie places with us, make sure to like the video, share it with a friend who loves mysterious history, and subscribe for more strange and fascinating stories from around the world.